So, could you introduce yourself again briefly?
Yes, my name is Sean Logan. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Helena and went through Helena Public Schools and later went to Montana State University where I got a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. And after college, I had a number of jobs, but ultimately in 1996, I was hired by the city of Helena as a firefighter. And during that time, I progressed through the ranks and spent the last 3 years of my career as the fire chief. And I retired several years ago. Since then, I've been volunteering for a couple of nonprofits that are in-state, and one's local, one's more statewide, Tri-County Fire Safe Working Group and Fire Safe Montana, both organizations that are dedicated to making communities safer in terms of wildfire.
And this is the second time that you've run for Helena City Commission. In 2017 you ran as well. Was that the first time that you had run for elective office?
Yes, in 2017 I had no political experience and had never run for office before, and so yeah.
So, Mr. Logan, why did you decide to run again for City Commission this year?
Well, that's a good question, and one I had to think long about. A couple of months prior to the filing deadline, a friend of mine asked me if I was going to run again, and my answer at that point was absolutely not. But it caused me to think about some discussions that I'd had with former colleagues about how things were going at the city and the struggles that employees were having, particularly department heads were having with the direction that the commission was headed. And in early 2019, a new city manager came to town, and I think things particularly worsened. The relationship between commission manager government worsened between them and the employees. And we've lost a number of them. And then in June, a couple of colleagues wrote a letter to the editor, to the Independent Record, and voiced their similar concerns, only in great detail, about more or less the toxic and somewhat hostile work environment that exists within the city. And I thought to myself, the only way to change that is to change the leadership. And so I filed actually on the last day of filing. So,
Well, what do you see as your main qualifications for this position?
well, as I said, I spent the bulk of my adult life working for the city of Helena as a firefighter. As I say, I was hired in 1996 as a firefighter, and the experience of that position gave me a street level understanding of the importance of effective and efficient delivery of city services, and not just about the fire department's services, but about the broad variety of services that are available to Helenans through city government. And that's a pretty important thing to understand, and because one, citizens come to expect it, and two, those services all really work together to make Helena, the great place to live that it is. As I progressed through the ranks, then I moved into administration and spent the last 3 years of my career as fire chief. And that taught me sort of a higher level understanding of how important it was for my department to be able to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the commission, with the city manager, with other departments, and with the community around us. And that's critical for good government. And it also gave me a very hands-on experience over the course of those years with developing a budget, with working with that budget development with the manager, with the commission, with the other departments that are trying to move their budgets forward to be able to effectively provide services for Helenans. And that's a pretty important understanding, and also gained a good deal of experience and working knowledge of City of Helena personnel policies. And I think, and this is not a criticism to other candidates, but I'm the only candidate, even among the seated commissioners, that have that hands-on experience within city operations. And I think those are some key qualifications. Also, and we may talk about this a little bit later, I hope, but in my retirement, I've spent a great deal of time volunteering, as I said, for those two nonprofits that has given me a broader understanding of resources that are available to our community to help us deal with wildfire.
Mm-hmm. What do you see as the number one issue facing the City of Helena right now?
For me, the number one issue facing the City of Helena, and I kind of hinted at it when you asked why I'm running, but I think it is the way that the commission manager government interacts with the community around it. And from what I'm hearing during campaigning and what I've heard from former colleagues and from business owners, is the commission manager government is not getting along well with the community around it. Whether you're an employee, whether you're part of a citizens advisory group, whether you're part of the press, member of the business community, or just a member of the public. I think they're really struggling now to connect with those community stakeholders around. I'll give you an example. In terms of employees, as of Thursday, of the 15 positions answerable to the commission and the manager, 12 of those are gone. So 80% of our executive leadership is gone since the election of 2017, but probably more of them have left since the new city manager came on. And that tells me there's something wrong there. And that's a dramatic and almost kind of spooky loss of institutional knowledge of the city departments about the community around them, a loss of relationships of those department heads within internal working relationships, but also in those relationships with the community and with citizens in general. And that's a tough loss. And in order to, we really, I think, have to address that difficulty. Right now, it doesn't seem like anybody within the commission seems to think that there's a problem with it, because this type of behavior or this dysfunction continues. And so, as I said earlier, in order to change that, you're going to have to change the leadership. And I honestly think that's the number one issue facing Helena.
Are there other issues that you believe haven't received enough attention from the city government in the past few years?
Yes, there's a couple. One for me is kind of what I'd call an elephant in the room. I think everybody's aware of it, but I don't believe that our city leadership has provided strong leadership in this area in recent years, and that's with our wildfire problem. For a number of decades, the city of Helena was very proactive, and it really started in 2000, and there's a little history to that I won't get into, but the city itself started addressing the various aspects of life in Helena that are potentially impacted by wildfire. One of the most important and I think most visible was work that was done in our 10-mile watershed on city lands. Fuel reduction projects that dramatically better protected the flume that serves Helena as a water source from the 10-mile drainage. Our open lands, our Parks Department and Open Lands Department began to do fuel reduction projects in our open lands areas, which will make our community safer in terms of wildfire. But our commission itself enacted law. They established a wildland urban interface area in Helena, which allowed the establishment of a roofing ordinance, which prohibited combustible roofing in Helena, which was famously overturned because it was the language that made the law was overturned by the Supreme Court. But that's still an important issue for Helena. When you think about a wildfire coming to town, it's not the flame front that's going to start our town on fire. It's the ember shower that comes out of that fire and rains down upon Helena, and one of the most receptive beds to those embers are combustible roofs. And so that's an important first step in a community dealing with wildfire. We don't want to become Paradise, California. We don't want to become Santa Rosa, California, or Colorado Springs. And sadly, recently, our city leadership, I think, has not provided enough direction. Last year, a $50,000, what was called a Ready, Set, Go grant, we took a pass on because, actually I don't know why we did, it would have provided some meaningful fuel reduction projects in evacuation routes and ingress egress areas to various parts of our community. I think that would have been a critical financial source to take advantage of. Last year, the Helena citizens overwhelmingly approved a levy to expand the fire department's budget, and that could have easily provided a couple of staff who could have begun to address, from a city standpoint, formally address what it means for citizens in Helena to make their properties safer, better educate our citizens in terms of prevention and their role when a wildfire comes to town. But it didn't. Ana Cortez came to town in January or February and said that her number one priority was the wildfire threat, and little has happened since then. In August, our city commission had to be convinced by a packed house up at the commission chambers to voice support for the United States Forest Service's 10 Mile South Helena fuel reduction project that would continue work to protect our watershed. And I think if we had not engaged them, they would have sat on their hands. That's not good leadership. Currently, this group I had mentioned that I'm volunteering for, Tri-County Fire Safe Working Group, has made an application for a $1.2 million multi-year FEMA grant to bring financial assistance into Helena to provide for fuel reduction projects for Helena citizens, as well as assisting with ignition-resistant construction. The city should be leading that charge, not just along for the ride, and we need leaders in the commission who take that threat seriously. I think another area that has been unaddressed or received little attention is another public safety matter. At the same time, the Helena Fire Department approached the commission about its staffing problems and its ability to respond to the volume of calls that they were receiving from the 911 system. The police department did as well. I mean, city meeting minutes reflect their approach to the commission with their similar struggles. I mean, they've got a significant call volume relative to the staff that they have. Not only police officers, but our dispatchers as well are struggling trying to keep up. And that manifests itself very directly in an officer's ability to respond in a timely fashion to a call. Sometimes they have to put a call in pending for hours or even to the next shift. And if you're the one calling 911 for help, that's not good scenario. So I think that's, and to my knowledge, little has been done to impact that on the street level. And I think our commission can do better in that area as well.
Very good. What do you feel the city government is currently doing well, and what do you feel they can improve on?
Well, I think as always, this has been my observation, throughout my career and beyond, was that the dedicated and hardworking employees that deliver those services that Helena citizens have come to expect, they do that in a very professional and a very efficient way. And I think those services are being delivered very well. And I think, honestly, what can be done to improve is make sure that our commission and manager are listening to their employees, whether it's an executive level department head or a street level employee. We got to make sure that we're listening to them, because they're the ones that manage and deliver those services. They know their operations. And maybe seated in the commission chambers, you don't know what it's like to drive a plow or fix a water main or respond to a call to the 911 system. And so it can be difficult at times for someone in that position to make good policy decisions when they don't know what it's like on the street. So I think we got to be tuned into our employees.
What do you think the role of the city commission and the city government ought to be?
For me, and this is the same as when I ran last time, but I think really the priorities ought to be those essential services that the city is strategically positioned to provide. Let's take a look at water, wastewater, solid waste, the police, fire protection, streets maintenance. Those are all, nobody else can do them, particularly as efficiently and effectively as the city of Helena can. And let's make sure those are supported. Let's make sure our business community, that the commission and manager have a good working relationship with them, so that we can ensure that our local economy is as robust as it can be. And really, first and foremost, in terms of a democracy, we ought to make sure that we as commissioners are listening to the community around us, really listening. Don't make our minds up before we go into a meeting, because that often nullifies any public comment that someone might bring forward. And make sure they feel heard and listened to. And there's been a couple of examples of late where citizens have even felt ridiculed because they brought forward opposing views, and that's not the role of an elected official, or not the role of our commission. We're elected to represent the community around us.
Are you supporting, or are you being supported by any of the other candidates who are running this year?
I have met Greg Painter, and I kind of understand the struggles that he has with city government, and I think we have some shared interests and values relative to that. I think he's got his priorities will be those essential services, I think, that I spoke of a bit ago. I haven't met all of the candidates. One thing I do know as to the incumbents, Commissioners Wicks and Noonan, if you're happy with the direction things are going now, I would recommend voting for them. If not, do your homework and voice a change in this election.
All right. What was the final message that you'd like to leave the voters with?
Well, I've thought a little bit about that as I speak to different groups, and if I had to distill it down to one word, that would be respect. And I think respect at this particular moment in time for the city of Helena is what's needed at the Helena City Commission. Not respect for the commission as being a noble and august body that governs our community, but rather the respect that those individuals have for their community. My experience in working in the city, with city leadership, commission manager, other departments, other governmental agencies and businesses and so on, was from the top down. It was a team approach, teamwork, and we treated each other with respect and civility. And when you have that, that makes good government. And I think our current commission manager government has abandoned that approach, and we've got to get back to what is described in the Helena City Charter as Helena is a community that has a basic decency and openness toward all citizens to be participating in their government. And that's critical. And that's what we need to elect leaders to the commission that feel that way, and that's what I intend to do as a Helena City Commissioner.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.